Hi, it's Mary Jane Cops, the phone lady. And this is my follow up to our 2025 report on phone and video communication trends. 168 senior executives completed a survey to participate in that report. And what we heard from many of them was that their team members in both sales and customer service were struggling with aspects of creating conversation. And in these videos, my intent is to provide ideas, scripting, um, skills that you can use when you are mentoring, leading, and coaching your team, whether that's team in sales or customer service. In this video, I'm examining the role of scripting, the truth of what scripting is from my perspective. The first thing I want to share about scripting is that it's the teacher. When you are starting a new member to your team, or you are asking someone to talk about a new product or service, you want to start them off with a script. I will take on some sales projects during the year for clients. And the very first thing I do is create a script for myself. And I have been selling for almost 40 years, but I still need that script to get started. I need that script to see how I'm going to engage the person I'm speaking to. And after each call, I'm making changes to my script because I'm creating it myself. And after maybe 10 or 20 calls, I have a script that I know really works. And this is what makes the conversations a lot more fun and a lot more profitable. So you're not going to ask team members to create their own script, but you need to give them a script to learn. This is going to be their teacher. And it's important that this is where you start. You need to give them plenty of time to practice. Part of it is going to be getting comfortable with the words, the length of the sentences, making sure they're including some enthusiasm, and so on. So, first of all, allow them plenty of time with the script by themselves, reading it, preferably out loud. And then match them with somebody. If the script is going to be used on the phone, have the other person on the phone with them. If it's going to be used on video, have people on video with them. If it's going to be done in person, make sure the role playing is done that way. And you may have to do this with them for several days. You want to get them really comfortable with that script. And then you're going to let them go on stage, so to speak. And know that you don't want to give them your most difficult prospects or your most challenging customers, because their first 10 to 30 calls are going to be tentative. They're going to have some nerves. They're going to flub up. We're still learning here. We're still teaching here, mentoring and coaching. And while they're making these first calls, you are recording and you are listening. You are recording and you are listening and preparing the feedback you're going to provide. Now, I know, because I still audit sales calls for clients regularly and customer service calls for clients regularly, that listening to calls can be tedious. But it's such an important element of mentoring, teaching, and leading members of a sales team and a customer service team. I want to give you some ideas on the feedback you're listening for when you are listening to calls. You, in addition to listening to the content, the words and the phrases, you want to listen to the speed at which the person is speaking and their tone. Are they energetic, or are they sounding tired and bored? You want to listen for iffy language. Are they sounding confident, or are they sounding unsure? You want to make sure they're listening. Are they reacting to what the prospect or the customer is saying to them? Do their questions arise because of what they hear? Or are they misinterpreting what that prospect or customer is saying? Are they tuning out? And finally, are they showcasing the support or advice or service that they're supposed to be talking about? Are they making the conversation truly about this person, this prospect, this customer? Or are they trying to make the call go very, very quickly? Is this prospect, is this customer experiencing your company's value and desire to serve? So these are the 5 key elements I listen for when I'm auditing calls. And then how do we deliver the feedback? Feedback can make people nervous, and it can be tricky to deliver, but the idea is that you want it to always be encouraging and positive. You want it to be about learning. You want to create the feedback so that you're giving them something more to work with, another tool, another idea, another wording, something that they can take away and use to get better and better and better. So when I'm working with teams and managers to help them, provide feedback, the best way is in an in-person meeting. Then there's individual either phone or video conversations. I have to take into consideration that lots of teams are remote, and often those remote teams are often in vastly different time zones. So sometimes the feedback may be delivered by a recorded audio message or a recorded audio message plus an email, or even better, a recorded video message and email. And I love giving feedback in group meetings. In fact, I just finished doing that with a client a few moments ago. When I was listening and auditing their calls, there was lots of similarities in places that team members could improve, where they could adapt with a new skill and improve their closing ratios. So we did it as a group, and it's great because they support each other in that meeting. And there's lots more discussion, which is valuable in the learning process. Email is not an ideal way to give feedback simply because words on a screen can be misinterpreted. But now it's going to sound like I'm contradicting myself. I'm not really. Once someone has been using this script for a certain period of time, you want them to move into improvisation, because a really meaningful and inspired conversation cannot be fully scripted. It can have a process, but you really want to allow your customer service team and your sales team to also be themselves, to be really comfortable in the conversation they're having, so they can create that deep engagement and create that trust element that's so important when we sell and deliver customer service. When I built my first business, my sales team grew to about 6 people, I think, at one point. And as I hired new people, they had a month to start with where they had to follow the script word for word for word. There was I needed them to do that because I needed them to really understand what we were doing. I needed them to be able to communicate that well to the prospects. And of course, as I'm telling you to do, I recorded and listened and recorded and listened and recorded and listened. And if they were able to integrate all that we were doing into their voice, into their presentation, and follow the script, and they were doing well, they were creating great conversations, maybe they even made a sale that first month or more, then I allowed them to start improvising, so that they owned the job, they owned what they were saying, and their conversations got better all the time. Once that improvisation was allowed into their world, their sales grew. But they needed that month at least to work with the script and for me to give constant feedback. I like including this quote from Chick Corea. a famous jazz pianist who was an amazing improviser. He could show up anywhere, get on stage with any group, and sit down at the piano and improvise. It was what he did. But he also said, you can't improvise without practice. So that's why we introduce the script. We create lots of time for them to work with it. And then we let them be themselves in these conversations because now they have the skills and the knowledge. What they want to have in front of them, what you want them to have in front of them, is a checklist because it is so easy when you're improvising to forget something. So I am introducing you to a wonderful book that's been of great help to me. It's a very easy read called The Checklist Manifesto. And the premise is that the World Health Organization recognized that because of technology, there were more operations taking place around the world every day, but there was also more injury and death taking place in operating rooms. And they asked Dr. Atul Gawande to see if he could figure out a way to solve this problem. So the book is the story of all the research he did. He's a great storyteller, and he did some really interesting things to try to figure out how to solve this problem. In the end, what he did was he set aside 12 operating rooms around the world, probably several in the US. I remember that there was one here in Canada, in Toronto. And in that operating theater, there was a checklist. So if you ended up using that operating theater, you had to follow this checklist before your surgery could start. And it included things like everybody introducing themselves to each other, because often in an operating room, not all the team members have worked together before, things like that. And what was interesting, and I may be misquoting here, is in terms of those operating rooms with the checklist, their error and death rate dropped by about 74%. So it's the same when we're communicating in customer service and in sales. We can, once we're improvising, we can really start enjoying the conversations and forget some of the things that we must include in these conversations. So having a checklist is a great idea and a very important one in terms of mentoring and leading and coaching. And again, I encourage you to read this book. It's a great read. You can also, once you've moved to this area where improvisation is allowed, you can create a report card. So you don't necessarily have to be listening as often as you were previously and having the feedback as often as you were previously, but you still need to listen to calls. And while you're listening to them, you can have a report card in front of you where you can tick off what they have done well and give them a score. And the score is good for you to know if they need a bit more training in a certain area. It's great for them too, because if they get 9 out of 10, they're feeling great. Maybe they need to adjust their checklist. So this is one that I have used with a wide variety of clients. Of course, it's going to change depending on your industry, if you're sales, your customer service. So I'm giving it to you as something of a template to consider. And there's 10 points for perfection on leaving messages and 13 points for perfection in terms of the conversation itself. And this is also a template. This is a template that I give when I'm working with new business owners who have never sold before and need to introduce themselves to their target market, maybe for validation, maybe because they really are already they've already started up and they need to do sales. So I'm letting you see how I've created this template. I'm not saying that this template is exactly right for you, but you'll see how I've got things in brackets, things in italics, where they would insert their own phrase. And then there's even instruction, listen to learn. What's going to be your next step based on what this customer or this prospect has said? So you can create a template similar to this when they're no longer following the full script, There's a partial script that you can use as part of your mentoring, coaching, and leading your team. And that's it for this video. Get in touch if you've got any questions or comments. Share this newsletter if there's someone in your circle that can benefit from it. Book a discovery call with me if you think I can be of value to you. And thank you for watching.